Honestly, I am overstimulated. I didn't know it was possible to get Christmas and your birthday mashed together on a random Monday in the middle of February. Hey everybody, it's Jenna. We need to talk about today's DC Studios updates. DC Studios co-CEOs James Gunn and Peter Safran held a sort of State of the Union like press event updating people on various projects and the plans for the universe overall almost 2 years after the initial Slate announcement. I wasn't lucky enough to attend the event myself, but I've spent the morning feverishly absorbing all of the coverage of it. Go check out my Phase Hero co-host Brandon Davis's video about what he learned from attending it in person. It wasn't necessarily a Slate update or an outlet for major casting news, but there is so much that we can glean from it. So let's dive in. I'll start with the updates on the 10 projects that were announced back in January of 2023. With Superman, James said, "We are really deep into post, and it's amazing that I'm even here because my mind is so focused on these minor cuts and changes, little things that we're doing to make the movie." He also reportedly teased that he's writing another project, something that he's hinted at here and there on social media over recent months, but he wouldn't say what it was, but he also wouldn't deny that it might be some sort of sequel to Superman. This is music to my ears, honestly. I have my own theories about what that sequel could or could not entail, but either way, I love being able to look forward to whatever he's writing next. James also addressed the significance of Superman being released in the current political landscape, saying, quote, "In some ways, I would say it's the right Superman because I don't think he's part of the cultural moment. He's a character who stands for something that is solid, for basic human morals, basic human integrity, the basic belief in protecting others, the weak, and the being good to people and being honest. He stands for what I think of as the rules that don't change." As someone who made an entire video on this topic back in November, I'm glad to know I'm not alone. Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is apparently halfway through production. James also touched on Jason Momoa's Lobo, comparing the fervor around him to Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. I love that mindset. I definitely think that comparison makes sense. He also said that we're probably not going to get an official first look at Lobo anytime soon because the production isn't filming outside. I love the fact that this movie has been filming for over a month now and is apparently so far into production, and we haven't been spoiled on absolutely anything. I think that is just beautiful. With Swamp Thing, Peter said, "And then something like Swamp Thing, our writer-director went off to make another little movie, A Complete Unknown, and we hope that he'll come back to Swamp Thing when he's ready. That was one of those things that we love him as a filmmaker, so we're happy to wait for him. Swamp Thing is not integral to the larger story that we're telling." I'm totally fine with this, and given my own theories about where the larger DCU story might be headed, I don't mind that Swampy isn't integral to that. You know, it's not like introducing Man-Thing without any indication of when we'll see him next, right before a story that involves the nexus of all realities. Of course, I'm also curious if Mangold's Star Wars movie will have any sort of bearing on the timeline for Swamp Thing, but as I'll touch on later, it's not like we're not getting other creature feature movies in the universe in the meantime. With Peacemaker Season 2, James confirmed that he is editing it simultaneously with Superman and teased that it is, quote, "much more about the characters and their interpersonal lives. It's much more about Chris Smith than it is about Peacemaker." I'm shocked that the magical buzzword that has been used in a lot of the conversation around the season didn't come up because I have my own theories about that, but it's great to hear that the characters will be at the forefront, especially because I am so curious how characters like Sasha Bordeaux and the other new characters are going to fold into the dynamics that we already know. With Paradise Lost, the prequel series about the Amazons, James confirmed that, quote, "Paradise Lost is totally still important and we're working heavily on it." Peter confirmed that the pilot is being written right now. I know the internet continues to have its feelings about the Wonder Woman corner of everything, but I am glad to hear that it is actively being worked on to the point of writing the pilot. I personally don't mind waiting a little while to distance from the recent cultural footprint of Wonder Woman, and this show is going to be so big and ambitious that I don't mind it taking the necessary time. I also feel like once we do get the show, it is going to be so extremely cathartic and necessary that it's really going to resonate with people. With Booster Gold, James confirmed, quote, "Booster Gold is going pretty strong. They were waiting for a showrunner to make time for it, but according to Peter, quote, maybe he fell out of love, maybe he got busy, but we had to pivot." I have my personal theories about who that showrunner might have been, but in the same vein as Paradise Lost, I don't mind waiting a little while for the show to be perfect. I honestly feel like the comedic timing of Booster in the comics can be interpreted in so many different ways, and so I totally understand wanting to nail that down before moving any further. Now, there are two projects that were previously announced to be in development in 2023 that are seemingly being put on the back burner: Waller and The Authority. James said, quote, "Waller has had a couple of setbacks, frankly. Authority has had some issues, but everything else has gone pretty well." I think some people need to recognize that development doesn't always equal a guarantee, but it already seems like a lot of the fandom and just the internet writ large misunderstands the difference between development and greenlighting and a project actually becoming a reality. It also doesn't sound like these projects are absolutely never ever happening again. It's just that they're taking a little longer to crack the story, which is okay by me. I would love to see what a Waller show entails and what characters would be part of that larger ensemble, but we will still absolutely see Viola Davis as Amanda Waller again. And I have no doubt that we'll still get similar story beats to the show in Peacemaker and Creature Commandos and probably elsewhere. With The Authority, Peter also said, quote, "It's a very, very big movie if you're going to do The Authority properly, and some story elements perhaps that are in Superman and some of the other films that we've fast-tracked step a bit on The Authority." James also acknowledged that the shift is because it feels difficult to crack the story in a world that's post The Boys. There are elements and characters from The Authority that I would love to see in the DCU, and I have a feeling that we still can, but I totally understand how the adaptation is kind of difficult to crack. For one thing, the lore in the comics is complicated, to say the very least, and I definitely was always curious to see how that was going to be adapted for mainstream audiences. And honestly, given our current moment, I do commend not wanting to just pile up on the dark superhero trope that The Boys took to a whole other level. And now on to Batman. Peter confirmed that with the Batman Part 2, Matt Reeves has, quote, "yet to turn in a full script, but what we have read so far is incredibly encouraging." On the topic of Robert Pattinson becoming the DCU's Batman, James said, quote, "It's certainly not the plan. Like, it's certainly not the plan." While Peter added, "And we love him, but we gotta introduce a Batman into the DCU. It is imperative, so that's the plan." James also added, quote, "These questions become headlines because they say, have you ever talked about this? We've talked about literally every permutation on the way to come into this job in terms of how were we going to handle it, what actors were we going to continue over, what were we going to merge. We've talked about everything. Have we ever talked about Grant Gustin? Yeah. Have we ever talked about Robert Pattinson? Yeah. We've talked about all those things, but serious conversations, no." I appreciate this honesty so much, and as someone who put my time into covering the Arrowverse, the Grant Gustin comment is super interesting to me. When all of the Pattinson DCU discourse first came out, I kind of felt like I was going crazy because the whole situation seems to me like they're just giving Matt the necessary time to get it right. As much as this wait sucks, I know it will be worth it, and I'm glad to finally have confirmation that we're not seriously bringing Pattinson in, because it feels like doing so would put both franchises at a disadvantage. On the topic of Brave and the Bold, Peter confirmed that they're developing the script right now and that Andy Muschietti, who has been attached to direct, is not directly involved, but that he, quote, "will be the first one to see it once the script is done." James also added, "Everybody knows I love Batman and it's important to me, so I'm working very closely with the writer on Brave and the Bold," but he wouldn't say exactly who it was. I am so glad to hear this and how imperative it is that they introduce a DCU Batman. I will maintain the belief that introducing the Bat family on screen is a once-in-a-generation opportunity that somehow has not been taken yet in a live-action film context, and I'm glad that they're taking it now and really building it out from scratch, as opposed to trying to retrofit it to another Batman. I am also very curious if Muschietti will end up directing when everything is said and done. They confirmed the first official details around Clayface, with Peter saying, quote, "This summer, cameras are going to roll on Clayface, which is an incredible body horror film that reveals a compelling origin of a classic Batman villain. This is another title that we added to the slate on the strength of an exceptional screenplay by Mike Flanagan. I think some of you are probably aware that we're in negotiations with James Watkins now to direct, and we'll start casting this as soon as we have the director deal done, and we'll shoot this summer. It's slated for a fall 2026 release." James elaborated by saying that, quote, "We had no plans making a Clayface movie. He turned in a script, and it's one of the best scripts that we've ever read." He also said that, quote, "We would have died to have gotten to produce this movie 5 years ago because it was just a really excellent body horror script, and the fact that it's in the DCU is just a plus." It was also confirmed that Alan Tudyk will not reprise his role as Clayface from Harley Quinn and Creature Commandos because his primary role in the universe is Dr. Phosphorus. Again, I appreciate the level of transparency on this, especially after the trades were reporting on Watkins as if he was already a done deal. I haven't seen his version of Speak No Evil or the original, but I have read the synopses for both because I'm kind of a chicken when it comes to certain horror movies. But I have seen his very first movie, 2008's Eden Lake, and it has still stuck with me for over a decade, so I am definitely on board with him directing Clayface. As much as I was hoping that Mike Flanagan would ultimately direct the script that he wrote, I'm very curious to see the alchemy of both of their creative voices on this project. Dynamic Duo, the animated movie about Dick Grayson and Jason Todd, is in pre-production, with Peter adding that it, quote, "provides a kind of perfect on-ramp for family audiences into the world of Gotham." I've said it once, I'll say it a million times, we need as many gateways as possible to get kids into superheroes, and I have no doubt that this one will be so beautiful and so special. I've already talked a bit about the project and about the animation studio Swaybox in a video from last fall if you want to check that out. It was confirmed that Daniel Craig, who was previously reported to be eyed for Sergeant Rock, was actually, quote, "never attached," with Peter saying, quote, "We never met with Daniel, he was just an idea." Luca Guadagnino is confirmed to direct, and they are actively looking for the star of the movie. This update is fascinating to me because it shows just how little we really know on the outside, even as every trade was reporting that Craig was in talks. I am really curious to see who Luca ultimately does cast, cast, because I feel like the archetype of Rock can be interpreted in so many different ways, and also because it seems like half of Hollywood really wants to work with Luca. It was also confirmed that a Teen Titans movie is in the works, being written by Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow screenwriter Anna Nagira, with James saying, quote, "It was something that Anna was really impassioned about, and she turned over an amazing script to us. She's fiddling with that now, but it's definitely not a finished script." I'm just glad we have confirmation that this movie is in the works. I have so many more questions about the roster and its relationship to Brave and the Bold, but I feel like we'll know more as the script actually becomes finished. When asked about the Deathstroke Bane movie that was reported to be in the works last fall, Safran specified, quote, "You say that like we've said that there is a Deathstroke Bane script," and confirmed that screenwriter Matt Orton is working on a script that is, quote, "something kind of like a Deathstroke Bane story." I could make an entire video just on the possibilities of this project because I really, really hope that it ends up being Secret Six. I feel like it is the perfect way to weave in both of these characters and a larger ensemble around them, but again, I'll wait till we know more. 4 seasonal crypto short films are in the works and will be released after Superman. Adorable. I love it. I hope they end up being in live action just to flesh out the world of Superman in small, kind of mundane ways after the events of the movie, but I also know that an animated version would be adorable as well. I've been meaning to make a full video on Crypto, in part because the Crypto the Superdog animated series was one of my gateways into DC. Either way, this feels like such an easy slam dunk after the response to Crypto from the trailer, and I'm glad to know that the next generation of kids can get a Crypto solo thing as well. Without getting too into spoilers, I'm also very curious how the seasonal release schedule of these is going to work in relation to Women of Tomorrow. It was also confirmed that a Blue Beetle animated series is in active development, which would continue the events and much of the same creative team as the 2023 movie. It will be presented for a possible greenlight, quote, "pretty soon." I'm glad we finally got official confirmation on this because it was a project that just suddenly started being talked about out of nowhere. I really enjoyed the Blue Beetle movie, and I think Cholo Mariduena is the perfect casting for Jaime, so I think it is a great choice to continue some of the kind of visual influences and the younger skewing sort of story into animation. Possibly the biggest surprise out of all of this for me is that 3 younger skewing animated series are officially greenlit, all of which excite me so much. My Adventures with Green Lantern will follow high school student Jessica Cruz, who has her life upended when, according to an official logline, a Green Lantern power ring falls from the sky and chooses her to be its champion. Things get even worse when more debris from the Lantern's ancient space war arrives along with their alien foes. Jake Wyatt is executive producing, and Stephanie Gonzaga is a co-executive producer. This title and logo treatment have me convinced that this is set in the same universe as My Adventures with Superman, a show that I absolutely adore. If that's the case, I think the Green Lantern lore is the perfect way to branch out that universe, and I think Jessica is the perfect conduit through which to do so. My head is already spinning with all of the possibilities for supporting characters and guest stars that we could possibly have with this show. Starfire serves as the origin story for the fan favorite titular character, perhaps best known as part of the Teen Titans. The show follows her adventures after she uses an ancient spaceship that she discovers on her home planet of Tamaran to escape her planet and explore the stars. Along the way, she'll meet space biker Crush, plant-loving Fern, and the magical Princess Amethyst of Gemworld, and together they will uncover the deepest reaches of the DC universe, save space dolphins, surf Technicolor nebulas, and boldly soar into the unknown. Josie Campbell is executive producing, and Brian Druhard is co-executive producing. It sounds like this is going to be disconnected from the Teen Titans movie, which is totally fine by me because this concept just sounds so perfect. I've talked about Crush a little bit in my Lobo video, and I could talk at length about Amethyst, so I am so happy at the idea of all of them being in a show together. This just sounds absolutely adorable, and I am kind of holding out hope that it has a sort of Sailor Moon-y sort of aesthetic to it. I feel like that lends itself really well to the characters and the kind of Technicolor nebula vibe of the series. And I am a Josie Campbell stan after her great work on My Adventures with Superman and on comics like New Champion of Shazam and Amazon's Attack, so I just have a feeling that this is going to be an absolute banger. And finally, there's DC Superpowers, which reportedly takes place at the Alliance School for Heroes and focuses on new students Lightning, Flash, Plastic Man, Aquagirl, Green Lantern, and Terra, who, quote, level up their powers under the supervision of Principal Martian Manhunter in the hopes of one day graduating and becoming the next generation of Earth's defenders. Matt Beans is executive producing, and Michael Chang is a supervising producer. A show about a DC superhero school is a concept that has almost gotten off of the ground multiple times. First was with Elizabeth Banks' Superhero High, a live-action series that was announced for Max and never came to fruition, and it happened again with Justice U, a proposed Arrowverse spinoff led by David Ramsey's John Diggle, which also did not come to pass. I feel like being in animation and having the full roster of characters at its disposal, this has a chance to work really, really well. This logline also raises so many questions as to who the characters will end up being. Will Plastic Man be Luke O'Brien, the son of the original Plastic Man? Will Aquagirl be Tula or Lorena or Andy? Which Green Lantern or Flash will it end up being? There are so many possibilities here, and I dig it. The logo also has me wondering if this will be the same aesthetic and vibe as the Bronze Age satellite era and the toy line and the art by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, because if it is, I'm about to be so unbelievably insufferable. The modern version of the toy line has already had so much fun adapting newer characters or newly popular characters into it, so I would love that kind of sensibility possibility with this show. I feel like you don't pick that name and that title treatment if you're not going to have that same sort of house style, but either way, this show sounds like a win. Beyond the project-specific updates, there are a few quotes from this event that I genuinely love hearing. There are plans to bring more DC characters into Fortnite, and James is giving, quote, notes and approvals on the character designs. As someone who spends way too many hours in Fortnite and loved how the Bloodsport and Harley Quinn DCEU skins turned out, I am so glad to hear this. They also confirmed that it'll be a couple years until we get an official video game set in the DCU, which is totally fine by me. Even that timeline feels impressive given the nature of the gaming industry. At this point, I would just settle for a DC version of Marvel Rivals. When speaking about the overall output, Peter said, quote, our production goal is 2 live-action films and 1 animated film per year, and we're also targeting 2 live-action and 2 animated series for Max per year. I really like this goal, and I feel like it is just the right way to saturate this new DCU and just the breadth of DC projects without feeling like it's too much for a viewer. They had another quote at the event about how every single project is going to be accessible in and of itself, but is going to have these little hidden Easter eggs if you happen to watch them all, and I think that is the way to go in this current day and age. I also recognize that targeting that number doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be set in stone, and it could be more or less in a particular year depending on what projects are ready. As fun as it is to get the Hall H or Disney Plus Day slate announcements, we've seen over the past few years that those can just change wildly anyway, or they can force projects to be rushed to some arbitrary date. It seems like things with this slate have become a lot more elastic, which Peter kind of elaborated on, saying, quote, we've laid out internally a plan, but we're happy to pivot as we discover things in the making of Superman or Supergirl or scripts being written. There's a flexibility built into it even though we know where the larger story is headed. Peter also added that, quote, we don't serve one kind of audience, so why make one kind of movie? Working in a multitude of genres, it affords us the opportunity to allocate resources where they can make the biggest impact. We budget according to the demands of the story and the revenue expectations of each title. It's sad that this feels like groundbreaking thinking, but it kind of is in this space. I feel like we're still trying to subconsciously shake the 2019 pre-COVID box office mindset where every movie needs to inexplicably cost $100 million or more and gross $1 billion in order to be seen as a success. That sort of one-size-fits-all mentality just doesn't work anymore, and it sets some movies that can and should be smaller up for failure. Again, this new mindset feels so much more flexible and fair to the projects that are being made. Box office success and even like viewership records on streaming should look different for everything, as opposed to just perpetually chasing this high that is eventually just going to become impossible. James also reiterated that, quote, we are writer-driven, we are not going to greenlight or put anything into production until we are happy with the script. It is hard enough to make a good movie with a good script. It is almost impossible to make a movie with a script that you're writing on the run. And this is so interesting given the other side of things, but it is so refreshing to hear as a fan who wants this all done right. James also said, quote, we don't want these characters to die out. We want to bring new stories and new life. We want to introduce these characters to new generations. And I think we are doing that slowly but surely. And honestly, that just speaks to my heart. In conclusion, I am extremely overstimulated, but very happy to see that this is the breadth of what we can now get from DC. I also love how all of these updates don't even come close to spoiling anything. If anything, I feel like we now know less about the actual story or certain casting choices, which leaves us so much more room to be surprised in the future. What do you think of this avalanche of DC news? Which project are you the most excited for? Is there a topic from this that you'd like to see me expand upon in a future video? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you haven't already done so. I cover DC and DC Studios quite a lot on this channel, so if you aren't already subscribed, I would hate for you to miss out. You can head over to the link in the description if you would like to purchase some merch. As always, you can find me on social media at Hey It's Jenna Lynn. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, go read some comics.